Hey everyone, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you from the collegiate wilderness, where I'm going to bag a few 14ers this week. Today we're going to talk about Cuba. Now, Cuba, the island, pinches access to the core territories of the United States. What makes the United States a world power is not just the fact that it's basically a continent in size, but it's got the greater Mississippi right in the middle of it, which overlays the world's most productive arable land. Water is the most efficient way by an order of magnitude to move things around. And so as long as you have a long waterway in an area where you actually have things to ship, you can't really help but not mess it up. And believe me, we've been trying for decades. And if you look at the last 4 presidents, whoo, and yet we're still here. Now, Cuba, because it straddles the access points to the Gulf of Mexico, has the possibility to end the United States as a major power. But that would require a lot more military force than Cuba is capable of producing itself. So the biggest threat to the United States going back well over a century has been that some foreign power will build a partnership with the Cubans that will break American power. And that's one of the reasons why JFK reacted so strongly during the Cuban Missile Crisis, because he saw it rightly as a Soviet effort to, on the cheap, end the United States. Now, since the Cold War ended and Cuba lost its Soviet sponsorship, I have been expecting a warming of relations and a change in the bilateral relationship for some time. Under Barack Obama, we got a ham-fisted attempt at that was basically negotiated over a short period of time with very little buy-in from the president because he didn't like to have meetings with anyone. And what we got was a deal of limited economic opening, minimal political connections, and it was a bad deal, start to finish. It was sophomoric, it was lazy, but above all, it was stupid. And so when Donald Trump came in, he killed that deal, saying that, we should have gotten a better deal, and he is right. But then he proceeded to not do a damn thing, and that was sophomoric, and that was lazy, and that was stupid. But consider in today's political climate that the two most polar opposite presidents that we've had both recognize the opportunity, even if they prove completely incompetent at building something out of it. So there is movement, there is possibility within diplomacy and economic diplomacy to shift this. Now, the window of opportunity we had after the Castros died is obviously gone. And the new regime, which is the old regime, just with like the third stringers, has definitely thrown in its lot to a little bit with the Russians, but the Russians don't have the money that they used to, so now the Chinese. Now, if you've been following my stuff, you know that I don't think that the Chinese and the Russians are going to be around all that much longer. It's certainly not an ability to project power a hemisphere away. So this is going to come up again and again and again and again. And hopefully the next time around, we will have a competent president who is capable of making a basic deal with a country that has less than 1% of America's economic and military heft that is right on our doorstep that can't possibly reach for support. It gives you an idea of just how little I think of both of the two previous administrations. I don't think that's going to happen under the Biden administration. However, there are a lot bigger fish to fry right now. And at the moment, the Chinese are still there. And as long as the regime in Cuba feels that it has a foreign lifeline, it's going to grab on with both hands. So a deal on this is inevitable. Doesn't mean it's imminent. All right, that's it from me. You guys take care. Hey everybody, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you from the Golden Banner Trail above Ken Carl, which is a suburb of the Denver Metroplex. Today we're going to talk about water, specifically all the water that northern China has gotten of late. They had heavy spring and summer rains, and they just got hit by a typhoon, and so there's significant flooding through Beijing. It's already killed a few dozen people. The key thing to remember about China is a lot of its government structures are a direct outcome of its geography. So the North China Plain, where the Han ethnicity basically has its core of power, is a big wide open area that is both drought and flood prone. The drought is normal climatic stuff. This is a semi-arid region, maybe roughly akin to a cooler version of central Texas or maybe central Nebraska. But instead of having kind of braided rivers that flow through it, it's got one single mighty river, the Yellow, that originates significantly upstream, a couple thousand miles away, that drains an absolutely massive watershed at an area that is a soil type called the loess, which is wind-driven soils, very fine particulates. And that means when this dry zone, a lot of it's actually desert, does get rain, most of it runs off. It carries a lot of silt with it, and that's why the Yellow River has its name. The silt is yellow. By the time you get downstream to where everyone lives in the North China Plain, it's a raging torrent. But it's a raging torrent with lots and lots and lots of sediment. Now, if you can capture that sentiment in kind of like the flood dry that you had in, say, Egypt or the American Midwest, you get incredibly productive farmland. But that requires you growing things like corn and wheat and the rest. China's a rice country. Water management's very important. Rice has to have very specific watering conditions at every stage of its production. Otherwise, the crop is lost. Now, northern China, they don't grow rice anymore, but after 2,500 years of growing rice, that has set certain things into motion. Specifically, they have to be able to control the river. Otherwise, the water will come or be not there at the time of its choosing rather than the Chinese people's choosing. And that requires a lot more organization at the state level, which tends to generate a stronger hand in terms of government and a requirement that you have everybody under a single house politically. Otherwise, various factions will just attack the waterworks and destroy whatever the hostile power happens to be. Fast forward that 2,500 years. Wrestling the river into shape means basically building ginormous dikes down the entirety of its length for the entirety of civilized northern China. That means the silt has nowhere to go. So in the Midwest, one of the problems that we've seen after just 150 years of trying to do this strategy on the Mississippi is you get silt on the bottom of the riverbed that raises the level of the water so that when one of those dikes does break, it floods an entire area. So a big thing that the Army Corps of Engineers have been doing over the last decade is leveling some of those dikes and turning some of the land to wetlands just to absorb the flood flows. This is at least 2 orders of magnitude more significant in the case of China because you're talking about the most dense human population footprint in the country. And we're going to rotate a little so you can see why I like this so much. See that? See that over there? There. That is Red Rocks Amphitheater. So if you ever want to see a good show in Denver, go there. I got a great view of downtown as the sun sets. Anyway, what this means now is that in China, you've got 2.5 millennia of sediment. And so every time there's a flood, it threatens the entire dike system. And if you have a break somewhere, it's a much bigger of a problem than you have in the Mississippi because after 2.5 millennia of heavy sediment, the floor of the river in many cases now above the ground level, surprising, of the surrounding lands, meaning that those dikes are 2, maybe even 3 stories above the cities. And if they break, the entire course of the river, river goes by the path of least resistance, crashes down into the populated zones. Now, that hasn't happened this year. I'm not saying it's going to. I'm saying that the Chinese really didn't finish their dike system to the current level of absurdity until just about 10, 15 years ago. They used to have floods regularly. They would kill hundreds, if not thousands of people. And in today's environment where the Chinese are facing every possible problem under the sun with their finance, their economy, and their demographics, this is just one more thing you have to factor in, because when this breaks, and physics tells us in time it will, they're going to lose significant portions of some of their most advanced infrastructure, not to mention lots and lots and lots of people. So whenever you see it raining west of Beijing, pay attention, because it matters a very great deal. All right, take care.